I call this meeting of the MSAD 49 Board of School Directors to order. Roll call. Bouchard. Booton here. Brown Woods.
Here.
Caverly. Davis Folsom.
Here.
Dumont. Ashe.
Here.
Hussey is unable to make it this evening. Knowles.
Here.
Lambert. Here. Michoud.
Here.
Ridgway.
Here.
And Williams. Will you please stand for the pledge? Approval of minutes. Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the district budget meeting on May 16th, 2022? It's been moved by Beth, seconded by Billy Joe, to accept the minutes of the district budget meeting on May 16th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 12. Oh, okay. 11. Is there anyone who opposes? Abstains? Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the May 19th, 2022 school board meeting? Is that Billy Joe?
Yep.
It's been moved by Billy Joe, seconded by Sarah, to accept the minutes of the May 19th, 2022 school board meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 7. Opposed? 0. Abstaining? Thank you. Citizens input?
Hi, my name is Sandra Poulin. I live in Albion. I'm also a teacher at Benton Elementary. I'm here to just ask that the board consider how we as a district can retain our ed techs. Just something that I'm speaking from, just from my personal experience from working in a school. It could be a school anywhere, not just this, this district. But I know right now everyone everywhere seems to need help, but I would just like to urge the board to consider the vital role the techs play in our school system, supporting students and teachers. I'd love to see our district do something that makes us stand out from other area districts. They're called our support staff because that's exactly what they do. They support us all in a way that is vital to our students and our success. Without them, we're nothing. And I'm just looking at the agenda, there's a couple of things that I just think tie into, keeping those techs, retaining the great ones we have, and attracting other ones. So I just ask you to consider that and anything you do moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. Moving on, there is nothing under old business. New business, special services, process, population served, district programming, staffing, extended school year, and compensatory services.
Thank you. This requested by the board at our last meeting. We need to be able, our directors to share an overview of all things special education in the district.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I feel like that U.S. Cellular commercial or whatever it was. Can you hear me now? Okay. So you had asked me about an overview of the special ed process. So the process begins with a referral. Either a teacher, parent, someone working with the child notices that they're struggling and submits a referral. They either ask for it at the school level or it's submitted directly to my office. After the referral is made, we have 15 days to attempt to get consent. And that timeline starts when the director signs and dates the referral as being accepted. And that is spelled out in our district policies. And then the parent signs consent, returns it to the school, comes to my office. And then the special education secretary assigns an evaluator, case manager, depending upon what evaluations are needed. And that varies per student and their needs. Once we receive that signed consent from the parent, we have 45 days to complete evaluations. The law does provide for allowable reasons to not meet a timeline. And that's usually related to the student not being available for evaluations. But we do our best to try to evaluate the child in different ways. The IEP team, at a minimum, is comprised of a parent, administrator, special education teacher, regular education teacher, and the evaluators that conduct the evaluations. We hold a meeting at the end of that 45-day timeline to determine eligibility. We use the state-required forms, so depending upon the type of disability that we're evaluating for, we'll determine what state form we need to complete. If the student qualifies, then we develop the IEP at that meeting, and we have 30 days to get that IEP to the parents and to implement it. After that initial qualification meeting, we conduct annual reviews of IEPs. Those are required by law. Other reasons to have meetings are program reviews. We may need to change something in the IEP, or we may not be able to meet the IEP. We do Chapter 33 IEP meetings. Those happen after a child has had 3 incidents of restraint or seclusion. We have transition meetings, which is when students come in from child development services, so they're entering public kindergarten. We do transfer meetings when students are new to the district. If they're coming in with an IEP or are in the referral process, we'll call an IEP meeting. Parents or anybody working with the child can request an IEP meeting to address any concerns that they have. So that's basically how the process gets started in the beginning. Taking a look at numbers, in 2021, our district enrollment was 1,935 students. Our special education count was 485 students. That's 25.06% of our population. In 21-22, our district enrollment was 1,922 students. Our special education count was 533 students. That is 27.7% of our population. The state average for special education identification in 2021 was 19.41%. So we are over-identified. We have 8 students in out-of-district placements. That cost can be anywhere from $235 to $370 per day, plus transportation and main care seat costs, at approximately 38% of everything that is billed to main care. Okay. So it's very easy for the bill for an outplacement for a child to reach between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. Coming in from CDS, we have so far 15 identified students. The state has also increased the age limit to the 22nd birthday, meaning that some of our students in high school who do not meet graduation requirements are able to stay in high school for 8 years. We currently employ 22 special education teachers, and we employ 74 education technicians. We employ 8 related service providers, and we contract with 4 related service providers. And we do have 20 special education technician vacancies. We consolidated the district day treatment and self-contained behavior programs to Benton and utilized out-of-unit placements to meet student needs. Some of our students are on a reduced day because we are short-staffed and we cannot keep everybody safe. That is for a short period of time though, and we get them back in on a full day as quickly as we can as positions are filled. So I would like to thank the board for approving the nominations that have been brought forth recently. That's really important to our program and being able to meet the needs of our kids. Our caseloads right now, our case managers, special education case managers, have a state limit of 35 students. Right now, caseloads are between 7 and 33 students. It's higher at the high school and lower at the lower grades and in our specialized programs where the needs of the students are greater. We try to keep it low for new teachers as well when they come on. Our caseload or service load limit is 50 for a full-time related service provider. And no one is at that limit or near it. We use our case managers and the special education office utilize Adori software to help us maintain our special education records and track our timelines. The software allows for reports to be pulled that really can't be pulled from other sources like Infinite Campus. We use it, it tracks our timelines for us. We enter in snow days and stuff on the calendar, so it automatically tracks when evaluations are due and timelines. It also allows for an audit feature, so when a case manager submits an IEP, it will let them know if there's anything big missing, like if they forgot a section, if there's no responsible person listed with a goal, things like that. So it helps slow down the time, it helps speed up the time that it takes to get an IEP into a parent's hands, because when the IEPs are reviewed in my office, all the components should be there. What we provide in special education, as you know, the law requires that special education services be provided in the least restrictive environment for students. So we have students that are receiving consultation services, which is the special education case manager may consult with the regular education teacher, talk about interventions and supports that can be done in the regular ed classroom. We have resource room support, which means students may be pulled out of their regular ed setting to go into the special ed classroom and receive specially designed instruction that cannot be provided in the regular education setting. We also have self-contained programming for behavior and life skills. We also provide, through a contracted agency, day treatment level services in our school. And the wonderful thing about that is that children can be served in the special ed setting or the regular education setting, depending upon their needs. And then there's also special purpose private schools that we send kids to. We provide extended school year services. Extended school year services are services for children who regress after regularly scheduled school breaks, and that takes a significant amount of time to recoup the lost skills. So the extended school year program is to prevent regression, and then we are also offering COVID impact services for students that have not made the expected progress on their goals. So we're offering that this summer, as well as through tutoring. Are there any questions?
There was one other point about compensatory services and what is our status as far as how many students of non-COVID related are receiving compensation?
Not COVID related, one district-wide, and that's just started before I got here. Oops, go ahead.
How does that process work and really the offer? Is it a teacher that would track that?
Well, the teacher creates the documents in Adori. We go in and we put in the basic student information in my office. When the referral comes in, they get entered into the system. And then the teacher's responsible for creating the advanced written notice, the prior written notice after the meeting, and the IEP. We also track, there's a calendar built into the software. So when there's a snow day or a day off for whatever reason, we can enter that. So when we get a referral and the consent for evaluation comes back to us, that date that we receive it gets entered into the system, and it automatically calculates the 45 days for us. So we don't have to keep looking at a chart like we did years ago of what's the timeline and stuff. And then when a teacher submits an IEP, let's say there's a responsible party for a goal, for instance. Every goal has to have a responsible person. So if they forget to enter who's responsible for that goal, it will trigger a notification that there's something missing in the IEP. Yep.
So you, as the director, review each IEP?
They're reviewed in my office. I don't review every single one. But between myself and my secretary, yes, we do.
So, just for clarification, when we're talking about days, are we talking about school days or calendar days?
School days. Most things in special ed run on school days. There might be one exception that's calendar days. And usually the calendar days refers to CDS, and but public schools run on school days for the most part.
How many, I guess this is on here, how many staff are we under?
As of today, 20 educational technicians.
And the full teachers, you have the staff that you need, right?
One comes in.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And so, can you explain to me, how, as far as if we're not able to provide something because we don't have, we can't get people to provide, which we know is a real situation here in a lot of places. What is the law and what is our responsibility, liability when we can't fill those positions, but we have students, lots of them,
Yeah.
that need services?
So law and policy dictate that we call an Iep meeting within 30 days, and we discuss alternative ways that we can meet the students' needs. And then keep track of whatever the student is missing and provide it when we can. That's that compensatory piece. The department, since COVID has happened, has gone back and forth about, do we call it COVID compensatory, do we call it COVID impact? It's, whichever way the wind blows, I guess, is what they're calling it today. But, we look at what the student has missed and ways that we can make that up. And we come to an agreement with the family, and that's what we do.
So so there's only one student we're providing paid money to, but other student mentioned it seemed like are on short day because we don't have the resources to provide them, so it's a safer environment for them to be home. They don't receive anything from us, it's just and once we can, we'll get you that in, is that how that works?
It depends, and it depends, unfortunately, is the answer most of the time in special ed because of the individualized nature of what we do. Some parents are accessing tutoring. We're sending, kids are coming in for part of the day, they're getting their, we try to get at least the health-related services in as a top priority, and then some time with the special education teacher, and then we supplement with work that goes home. We're providing the COVID impact services over the summer. So for our kids that have been on a reduced day, those kids automatically qualify for the COVID impact program this summer. And if they need more than that, then we work out an agreement with the family and talk about tutoring or other ways that we can meet the students' needs. And it has, we have outplaced as well. We have placed kids in special purpose private schools this year because we could not meet their needs, and they did need more than what we had available.
So for your summer compensatory services or COVID impact, are you fully staffed at this point for that? Or is it-
At this point, yes, it's looking like we will be okay.
I have a question. Are you noticing the amount that we are over the main average of identification? It's roughly 10%. Are you noticing or finding that students are being identified at a younger age now?
Actually, I'm getting the opposite. I'm getting students being referred much older. We're getting referrals from the high school, from the junior high.
And I don't think the wording over-identified, we may have legally identified.
Right.
You have another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now that the age has turned 22, do we see that we may have more students staying that will increase caseloads at the high school level?
Yes,
So that may mean additional staff
yes,
in the next couple of years, or maybe next year?
yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
State approved school construction, how the state funding works.
Hi, I'm Bill Stockmeyer. If you're ready for that. Roberta asked me to present to the board on how the funding for the new elementary school project will work. I'll try to do this standing up. If that doesn't seem to work, I'll sit back down. Is it okay, audience member, if they want to shift over a little bit, if they see the screen, if you wish to. When we ask how, so first of all, I work at Drummond-Whitson. I'm the head of the public finance practice at Drummond-Whitson. I work on most of the state-funded school construction projects in the state of Maine, including of late the Sanford High School project, the Bath High School project, the Caribou Elementary School project, the SAD 54 elementary project. My partner Greg works on the RSU 10 project, so we work on a lot of these projects. Okay, so that's one of the things we do when we're not doing school budgets. So when we ask ourselves, how do we fund schools in the state of Maine? I think it breaks down to really two fundamental questions, right? What will it cost, and what will it cost us, right? So that's what I This will ultimately boil down to those two rather simple answers. But funding has implications at every level of every approval level for the project. So let me just run through the approvals that your project will require. The first one, as you know, is site approval, and that's a state board approval coming up soon. That sets the site of the school. Concept approval by the state board sets the project budget, okay? And then from there, you have to get to referendum approval by the district voters, which authorizes the project financing. Now, up until that point, the costs of the project have to be borne locally, okay? Because you have an architect, you may have legal costs, you may have costs related to an option on real estate, so you have costs. But not to despair, there are ways to recoup those costs after the fact, okay? But up until that point, you're not allowed to borrow for the project. After the referendum, you can borrow for the project, and then you have borrowed funds to proceed to the next two steps of approval, which are final design and funding approval by the state board. So that's a stage where the completed design is ready to go out to bid, and you'll find out how good those estimates were of the project cost. So that's also sort of has funding implications. And finally, there's final funding approval. This was implemented a number of years ago because it used to be when projects came in under budget, there was like a sort of a grab bag of movable equipment and other things that you could put onto the project at state expense, and the state was happy to help you because that had already been budgeted. But as they sort of tighten things up a little bit, what happens now is if the bids come in low, not a problem in the last couple of years because they tend to come in high. The commissioner gets an after-the-fact sort of final funding approval look at the project and might adjust the budget downward if the bids came in low. Okay. So as I say, each of these has funding implications, and I think the first significant thing is really establishing the project budget, which happens at concept approval. That's a negotiation, sort of a delicate dance, if you will, between the district and their needs and how they, bring those forward. The project architect, who's your advocate on your behalf with the department, and the construction team at the Department of Education, which has a ton of experience with these projects. Okay, just a ton. They're enormously helpful, and although we sometimes don't always see eye to eye with that team, I can assure you that they are really interested in doing what's right for kids, and they've demonstrated that time and again as they've dealt with different problems that have come with projects to help out their partner, the local school district. The concept approval has a budget, and it consists of two portions. One is called the state-local budget. That's the portion of the budget, the debt service on which will be added to your EPS formula, okay? And that's going to be typically 94 to 100% of the project will be state-local, qualifying for state subsidy. The rest, there's a local-only budget, which is usually between 0 and 6%, and that includes things like if your land cost exceeds the value of 2 appraisals and the seller isn't going to sell it to you for the appraised value and wants a premium, that would be a local-only cost, that difference, okay? I don't believe you have that in your project, so that's good. If you decide you want a larger size gym in the state will fund, okay? That cost increment would be a local-only cost. Go for it. You know you want it and need it. There are good reasons for that, but that's on your nickel, okay? And the third one that comes up sometimes is there might be a sort of a community need. This might be, well, it really could be anywhere, such as an emergency shelter or something like that. And that would be a non-school cost if sometimes that happens. And I just say, I put the asterisk by the local only up to 6%. I put an asterisk there because when it gets up in that range, in my experience, usually that a significant amount of the local only budget is being offset by fundraising opportunities, which do not exist in many communities and may not exist in your community, but in a few they do. And So for some examples of the local-only portion, Sumner Memorial High School, RSU 24, the local-only portion of the project budget was 1.66%. RSU 10 in Mexico, the local-only portion, I think it's being voted on soon, I'm not sure, my partner Greg's doing that one, is 1.3%. Caribou, which had some local fundraising, was 4.77%, that elementary school. Skowhegan, which is being voted on the 14th, has 5.89%, but of that $4.4 million local only, they have very good reason to expect gifts from the Kennebec Valley Community Action Program of $3 million. So taking that away, you'd be down in the 1 to 1.5% range as well, I would think. So those are some examples of projects with local only budgets. So there are three sources of money for projects. Local funds I already mentioned, so that might be you're going to apply a capital reserve fund to those early project costs before you have the authority to borrow. The architect still needs to get paid. The landowner, there might have been an option fee and our legal costs. So those local funds can fund the early project costs until the referendum vote. And as I say, once you borrow, you can pay yourself back. And not mentioned here, I should add though, and when you pay yourself back, one of your options with the money you paid yourself back with is to spend it somewhere else on capital needs or to apply it to the local-only portion of your project. Okay? So not only can that money fund the early cost, but when it's paid back, it can then reduce the amount you have to borrow for that small portion that's local-only. Then I mentioned following the referendum, you will issue a temporary note. Okay? It's called a bond anticipation note because it's a note issued in anticipation of issuing a bond. So a ban or bond anticipation note. And those, like as I mentioned, they can reimburse the local funds expended, and they can pay the costs to get to referendum, which are all the substantial proportion of the design costs to get to referendum. No, excuse me, I'm sorry, misstated. Substantial portion is after the referendum. It's enough to get you the budget estimate, okay? So it's a modicum, if you will, of those costs. And then after referendum, you may also need to issue temporary notes because you still don't have final funding approval. Once you have final funding approval, you pay back the temporary notes with the long-term bonds, which are 20-year bonds. So those are sort of the three sources. So what are bonds and what are bans? When I was first asked my law firm to do this, I literally didn't know what a bond was. I don't mind admitting that. So a bond, just like a promissory note, a bond is the legal document, the instrument that's the evidence of your debt. Okay, and these things, so these are bonds and bans, the temporary notes, the bonds are the long-term obligations, and so they're very much the same. It's just a question of the duration, right? So they're debt obligations. Unlike my loans, which are supported by collateral, these obligations are called general obligations. That means they're not secured by the real estate. The school is actually not the collateral for the loan. What's the collateral? The collateral is the taxing authority of SAB 49. It's called the full faith and credit. It turns out that's actually much better collateral than real estate, because who wants to figure out how to sell a school, right? So, but if they know that you have the legal authority to raise taxes and are committed and pledged to raise taxes, and they can enforce that obligation to raise taxes, they don't have to worry about, the collateral. So they're general obligations. Because they're general obligations, by the way, that's why these things almost always have to be approved by the voters, right? Because ultimately the voters are responsible for the debts, along with the state, which we'll talk about later. The bonds will repay the bans, including the band interest. So when we talk about bonds being issued or sold, that only just means that the money's being borrowed, okay? When the district issues a bond or sells a bond, it's buying money, which means it's borrowing, okay? So that's just different lingo in the bond world than what most of us are used to. In MSAD 49's case, the bonds will be sold to the Maine Municipal Bond Bank. And the earliest the state would allow you to sell those bonds, assuming you're ready, would be the fall of 2024. They keep a schedule, and all the projects are like planes on a runway, and when they have capacity for you to issue bonds, that's when you issue your bonds, and that's how that works. And we know that the earliest you would be allowed to, assuming you're ready, is fall of 2024. Unlike consumer loans, these are not equal payment bonds. The bonds have equal principal payments, equal annual principal payments. So the same principal payment every year. It doesn't go up. Like, you know, with our loans, you look at the end of the first year, it's like, oh my goodness, I have no equity at all. I'm like zero, right? And it's only at the very end that you start to build equity. So it's a much more conservative way of borrowing to do equal annual principal payments because the principal is being paid down faster. Okay, so that reduces the total interest cost significantly as compared to the blended payments that we're used to for our commercial loans. And for school districts, that's a legal requirement, not so much for towns. The interest is paid semi-annually. In the case of state subsidized projects, the bonds are going to be 20 years. And typically for arbitrage reasons, a project this size might have two bond sales, one after the construction bids are in and one a little bit later. So your bonds are tax exempt, which is a lower interest rate bond. The investors don't have to pay income tax, and they pay pass that savings on to you with lower interest rates. And there's thousands of pages of IRS regulations restricting tax exempt bonds because of schemes that people come up with to make money based upon the ability to invest money at a higher rate of interest than the tax exempt rate. And so to prevent that, there are all sorts of arbitrage regulations, and to avoid people from borrowing too soon and investing the money, sometimes we have to do two bond sales for a project. So what will it cost us? Well, that's going to boil down to a two-part question. How much will those state and local bonds cost, that 94 to 100% piece? And how much will those local-only bonds cost us? And then for each of those questions, and what's the budget impact of those bond payments? Right, that's really where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? What's the budget impact? That's what we want to know. So you don't have a project budget yet. So the answer is I don't know. So let's use a hypothetical example. And I think you'll be in the ballpark. We don't really have this information until the project budget is developed, but based upon informal conversations I've had with the Department of Education, what do you think? This is probably not an unrealistic hypothetical, okay? So here's hypothetical school district, elementary school, and their bond costs. So they have a hypothetical construction budget, so they've reached concept approval, which you haven't yet. And the state has said, okay, we're going to approve a budget of $40 million for state local and $1 million for local only, okay, which is 2.44%. So right in that range that we were talking about. So a total of a $41 million project. And I tend to use blue for the state, local, and red for the tax impact, and purple because it's a combination of blue and red. So that's just how my mind works. So that's our project, okay, a $41 million elementary school with $1 million local only component. So first, let's look at the budget impact. Keep in mind, the budget impact and the tax impact are two very different things, okay? If you get money in for the money that goes out, no tax impact. If you don't get money in for money goes out, big tax impact, right? So budget impact is different, but what's the budget impact? Now remember I said you had those equal principal payments? One of the consequences of that is the biggest budget impact is going to be the first year that you make your first bond principal. Because each year after that, you're paying interest on a smaller and smaller and smaller amount of principal. So again, unlike your loans, which are the same every year, they start out high and they go down, and that reduces the total interest cost because the principal is paid off faster than my car loan, for example. Okay? So the best way to approach this question is to say, well, let's look at that first year of maximum budget impact, because we know it's going to get better after that. Okay? So in the first year of that $41 million bond, the budget impact at current interest rates that I received today from the main bond bank, who did a projection formula, the first year of budget impact would be $3.3 million. Okay? But remember, that's the budget impact, right? So what's the tax impact? How much will it cost us? Okay, remembering that the state-local portion is 97.56% in our hypothetical, right? 40 divided by 41 will be 97.56%, all right? That means that this portion of the $3.3 million bond payment attributable to the state-local bond is almost all of it, $3,250,920. But still, that's just a budget impact. What will it cost us? And the answer, which is hard to believe, but true, is zero. So email from yesterday from the Department of Education and School Finance Manager, just to verify what I was getting. The addition of debt service at this time, speaking of the state-local debt service, increases the state contribution, and because all 4 towns are currently at the mill expectation amount, there is no increase in the required local contribution. So what that means simply is the state-local portion of the bond, that first year $3.25 million payment, is going to be matched dollar for dollar by an increase in your state subsidy. Okay? Now, when we get there and you look at your ED 279 and your formula and you see that, okay, they've included that, here's the total that the state contributes toward, but darn it, I'm still paying a percentage of that. Bill told me I was paying nothing. How can that be? It's a semantic game. So think of it this way. Let's say you have a school district with a $2 million budget and the state is funding half of it, 50%. Now they take on some debt, another $1 million. So now the school budget is $3 million. The local contribution under this set of facts is still going to be $1 million. So in a sense, you're paying a third of that $1 million, like the first $1 million, like the first $2 million, right? But if you look before and after, you're paying exactly the same amount. You're paying 50%, and then when they added on debt, but also added on subsidy, you're just paying a smaller percentage of a larger number, but the net impact is zero, okay? Another way to think about it is a graduated cylinder with oil and water in it, okay? Someone tell me, I can never remember, it's the oil that floats on top of the water, right? Okay, so let me turn my... There we go. All right, so think of the water at the bottom as what you pay locally, and the oil as what the state contributes. Okay, when you get a state, local, approved debt service payment, it's all oil. So if you pour more oil in, you look at the total, you're still paying a percentage, right? But it's the exact same dollar amount. That's all because, as Paula says here, all 4 of your towns are currently at the maximum mill rate expectation. For those EPS costs, is a maximum tax effort required. All of your towns are at that level, and as long as that continues to be true, there's very little reason to think it won't continue to be true in your case. That will be true each year. So, you'll find here observations and assumptions. As I just said, all 4 towns are already paying the maximum effort. And so when you increase the state-approved debt service, that doesn't change the maximum the town must contribute. So as long as that remains the case, that's our first assumption, and there's very good reason to think it will remain the same. Under the current formula, second assumption, I suppose they could change the formula, right? The impact of the state local debt payment would be zero on all 4 towns over the 20-year bond term. Another assumption, this comes up, this came up in one town which drew its regret in the middle of a state funding crisis. They were terrified that the state might not honor its commitment to pay the debt service every year. They might change that because of the state fiscal crisis. When the state has curtailed subsidy in prior years, in my entire tenure doing this, they have always maintained the subsidy for the state approved debt. So you might get a 5% curtailment on everything else, but if the past is repeated, they maintain the state approved debt. And the reason for that is it's a very successful program. They want to honor their commitment, and it's good for everybody's credit rating, including the state, for them to honor that commitment. What happened in that one town that voted down their state approved project was that their students continued to be housed in modular leases that the state is subsidizing, and the state eliminated the subsidy on the modular leases that they had, but maintained the subsidy on the construction project that they had voted down. So I think it took them like 10 years to get back to where they wanted to be. It's a really sad situation. So that I mention that because that question came up. So now let's look at state local portion, the lion's share, the large lion's share, maybe 100%, zero tax impact in SAD 49, currently and likely to continue into the future. So let's look at the local only bond, that 0 to 6%. In our hypothetical, it was 2.4%, $1 million bond. At the same interest rate, using the numbers the bond bank gave me, equal principal payments would be $50,000 every year for 20 years. And in year one, that year of highest budgetary impact, at that hypothetical rate, the interest payment would be $31,273 for a total tax impact of $81,273 for a $41 million bond finance project in the year of highest tax impact. And that will go down each year as the principal balance decline. So what about my town? Well, that will break down at current, your cost sharing is based upon your valuation. Albion is 14.7%, so the impact in Albion would be a little under $12,000. Benton and Clinton, just over $18,000 each, and Fairfield, just over $33,000. Keep in mind, those percentages go up and down slightly each year as the state valuations are not in lockstep with each other across the towns, so that the variances due to that each year. So that's not looking too terrible, I would think. So the tax impact of the local only bond, another way to look at it, currently your local taxes to support essential programs and services, for your additional local funds, for a school nutrition program, for adult ed, the total tax bill is $10.2 million. That hypothetical payment of $81,273 would be under a 1% tax increase, 0.8%. Another way to look at it is if you have a $10,000 tax bill, it would be $80. Again, that's our hypothetical. So in summary, for our hypothetical elementary school of $41 million, zero tax impact of the state local debt service because our hypothetical school district has a valuation and pupil count profile similar to SAD 49. And tax impact with the $1 million local only, if that's what it is, it could be less, it could be 500, it could be zero, right? It could be more. If it were $1 million, which seems to be an average, that would be $81,273. And so at the end of the day, the state would be paying almost 98% of the debt service, and the hypothetical district 2% of the debt service. So that's it. Any questions? Yes.
What happens in your example, say it's hypothetical, but what happens, for instance,
So first of all, in that situation, which has happened a couple times, once or twice, I guess, as between the district, the towns, and the bondholders, the town that withdrew remains as fully liable on the bond as if it had been withdrawn. As between the towns, so I think these examples before is obviously a terrible situation, but your bank doesn't care what you two might agree to. You're both liable for the loan as far as the bank's concerned. But as between the two of you, as between the town that left and the towns that stayed, depends on what the agreement was. Okay? And for all practical purposes, I mean, I haven't heard of a situation of a district or a withdrawing town, basically defaulting on what it agreed to. I mean, we did have a couple of disputes, but they resolved themselves. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on, under appointments. Is there a motion to offer Marika Richardson a position as a special education resource room teacher at Lawrence Junior High School for 2022-2023?
So moved.
Been moved by Terry and seconded by Ray to offer Marika Richardson a position as a special education resource room teacher at Lawrence Junior High School for 2022-2023. Is there any information?
Yes. So Marika is a special education resource teacher at Lawrence Junior High, doing direct services CLA. So it's open. Her education background is a BA in child development from Maryland Military University, a master's in rehabilitation counseling from the University of South Carolina, and a master's from Grantham University. She's currently working at Caseloads Community School with 3.5 years of experience there. She did only work at Swansea Middle School prior to that and worked in several complex apps.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's 12, 0, 0. Resignations. Ashley O'Brien, Fairfield Primary Teacher, resignation of June 2022. Committee reports. For negotiation committee, we are currently in the process of negotiations with the Educational Technician Association. Any other committee reports?
I just wanted to mention that we talked about for the new school construction that the square footage and whatnot that we're working with, we briefed on last meeting, but those slides and even the conceptual first draft, I guess, of a conceptual drawing is on the school website now. If you haven't noticed it, it's there. There's actually some good information and a few slides there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
And I'll just follow up on Terry's remark. We intend to have a public forum then on an update for the school construction project will be June 22nd. We're ready to put together a bulk mailing to all of our residents in our four towns. And CJ will be here to update on moving. By then we will have moved through hopefully to see the state board
Is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant 1 MRSA section 4056E, consultation with legal counsel?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ray, seconded by Neil, to go into executive session pursuant 1 MRSA section 4056E, consultation with legal counsel. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?